Retro video games have been a fascination of mine for as long as I can remember. I remember watching my dad play games like Super Mario 64 and Diddy Kong Racing when I was a really little kid, and being shocked when he told me that those games were, at some point, some of the most graphically impressive games out there. Even looking back on the games I played at that time, and comparing them to how some of my favourite games look now, I'm in awe of how far games have come. In this video, I aim to rank every retro video game I've ever played. For the purpose of this list, I'm counting every console generation before the 7th gen as retro, but I do also aim to rank the games I've played from later generations at a later date. That being said, let's get on to our first set of games. The Game & Watch is a piece of Nintendo's history that I find so incredibly cool. While I don't own an original Game & Watch unit myself, I've played a few of the games on the 3DS Virtual Console version of Game & Watch Gallery 3, and own the Zelda one released for the series' 35th anniversary. Thus, the only 4 Game & Watch games I've played a good amount of are as follows. In Egg, you play as a wolf, catching eggs as they roll down 4 different paths to stop them from hitting the ground. The timing of the rolling always felt inconsistent to me, and the controls never really clicked. I'm probably just mad because bad. C-tier. In Mario Bros, 2 men pass cakes along 5 conveyor belts to stop them falling off. You can choose to control the 2 characters yourself, or share the system with another player and play co-op. I really like this game for that reason, but I can't rank the game very highly given how lacking all these games are in depth. C-tier, but high C-tier. In Vermin, you move left and right, positioning hammers above the heads of vermin as they dig up from the bottom of the screen. In the Zelda version, you play as Link. The game's fine enough, but nothing really to write home about. C-tier. Last, but certainly not least, is Greenhouse. This game clicked with me as soon as I played it. You move a man around a greenhouse with a D-pad and spray bugs with a single button to stop them from eating the plants. Unlike other Game & Watch games, there is actually some strategy to this one, and there is a risk-reward to both ways you can spray the bugs. I genuinely really like Greenhouse and would recommend it if you're looking for a good, high-score-based endurance test. B-tier. Baseball is a completely rubbish game, but I do find some enjoyment in it whenever I play it. I have an ongoing rivalry with one of my friends over this game, and we play it together every once in a while, so I find it fun enough. That being said, I don't think the game is very good at all, and would never play it outside of the context of a novelty with friends. D tier. I will never understand how Donkey Kong was a successful game. It has the most awful controls out of any game I've played, and you die instantly from even the slightest fall. It's one of the least fun games I've ever played, only having the slightest value as a novelty to come back to maybe once a year. D tier. Dr. Mario is actually a really good puzzle game. I haven't played it nearly as much as I have other puzzle games, but I do enjoy it a lot when I play it. B tier. Everybody gives Ice Climber a lot of hate, but I don't really know why. I understand that it lacks depth, like most old high-score-based arcade games, but I don't hate the way it controls, and I have fun with it whenever I play it every few months. I also really like Nana and Popo as characters. However, I acknowledge that it is just a novelty for me. C tier. Kirby's Adventure is easily my favourite game on the NES. It's much more than a novelty, unlike other games on the system, and I highly recommend it to modern audiences. It's genuinely a lot of fun. A tier. The Legend of Zelda hooked me when I played it, but I never came back to it. The game is impossible without a guide and really isn't all that fun. I do think it has some of the better looking sprite art on the NES though. C tier, but quite low. Super Mario Bros. Is fun, but from that era where games were too limited to be long, so they were made unnecessarily difficult to pad out playtime. I do enjoy playing it every once in a while, but it's kind of just a novelty nowadays. C tier. Yoshi is one of my favourite puzzle games. It has a good multiplayer mode, which is extremely rare for an NES game and is genuinely challenging later into the game. I always have fun with it whenever I play it. B tier. Link's Awakening easily has one of the best stories out of any game in the Legend of Zelda series. It can sometimes be quite unclear as to what you're supposed to do in the game, but I had fun with it when I played it. I also really like all the Nintendo references scattered throughout the game. It's a good game on the Game Boy, but I wouldn't recommend it due to the limitations of the hardware. The Switch version is a better option if you want to check it out. B tier. Tetris on the Game Boy is a fine version of Tetris, but I would rather play any other version of it. It doesn't feel as good as modern Tetris is to play, but I also played it on modern hardware through Nintendo Switch Online, so its shortcomings were hard to look past. C tier. Although I'm not a fan of later entries in the series, the original Donkey Kong Country is actually really fun. The game is difficult, but rarely feels unfair and has a ton of secrets to discover in every level, which is great when you're stuck on the same set of levels for multiple hours. Also, the art style is really unique, having pre-rendered 3D models instead of regular 2D sprite art like other games on the system. I highly recommend this game. A tier. Super Mario All-Stars is a collection of all the NES Super Mario Bros. Games, upgraded to have 16-bit graphics. However, I wouldn't say these versions are the definitive versions of these games, and if I was to play through them all, I'll probably just stick with the originals on NES. I'm glad that the game existed, but it's had its time, and doesn't hold much value for modern audiences. C tier. Super Mario Kart is easily the worst Mario game I've played. The art style is so unbelievably ugly, and the karts feel terrible to control. It was the start to a great series, but it is far from a great game. D tier. I never got around to finishing Banjo-Kazooie, but I really like what I played. The game is a lot like Mario 64, which I guess is why the game did so well, seeing as people loved that game so much. Everything about the game is absolutely overflowing with charm, and I love it to bits. I definitely intend to come back to the game and finish it someday. A tier. Mario Kart 64 is a game that I enjoy playing occasionally, but I'd rather play most other games in the series. Today, it doesn't have much value outside of speedrunning. The game also uses pre-rendered sprites for the races, despite the game being in 3D, which is kind of cool. B tier. Diddy Kong Racing demonstrates why Mario Kart 64 used sprites for the races by having really poor performance. The game isn't particularly memorable either, and I'd much rather just play Mario Kart 64. However, the game is the first to feature Banjo, which is really cool to me. C tier. I've only played the first level of GoldenEye Story Mode, but I did like what I played. What I have played a lot of, however, is the multiplayer. GoldenEye's multiplayer is one of my favourite experiences on the Nintendo 64, mostly due to how ridiculous it can be at times. Genuinely a great game to play with friends once or twice. B tier. Ocarina of Time was the first 3D Zelda game and is my second favourite game in the entire series. It is an amazing story, great characters, and is an overall really memorable experience. If you're into Zelda or retro games as a whole, I can't recommend this game enough. You should probably play the 3DS version if you can though. Easily one of my favourite games. Super Mario 64 is one of the most iconic games of its generation, and for a good reason. The game can take some getting used to, but after a bit, Mario feels amazing to control. It's one of my favourite speed games, but it still has value today as a genuinely good game to experience casually. I highly recommend it. I'd probably say I prefer Ocarina of Time, but this game is a very close second for my favourite game of the system. Namco Museum is a good little collection of Namco arcade games. It's fine, but lacks depth and is a little underwhelming for the Game Boy Advance, given the capabilities of the hardware. C tier. As much as I've tried to get into Mario Sunshine, I've never been able to. What I've played of it has been fun enough, but I never stuck with the game. I don't know what it is about it, but it never clicked with me like other games in the series have. I want to love this game, but I can't put it any higher than a C. Super Smash Bros. Melee is such a cool game to me. The whole culture around Melee and the techniques used in competitive play are just two of the reasons why the game is still so popular over 20 years after its release. If you haven't already, I'd highly recommend watching a set of competitive Melee, and if it looks cool to you, you should download Slippy, a mod of the game made by community members for PC and Mac, allowing for online play. I got one of my friends into it the other day and he's been loving it, from what I can tell. Even if you don't want to get into the game competitively, playing against CPUs is still a lot of fun, and I highly recommend checking it out. A tier.